Yes, just here, yeah. There we go, thank you. Okay, guys. Let's get rocking. Today is lesson 9 of Colorado Contracts and Regulations. My name is Jim McCloskey, and today we're going to start on page 21-1, chapter 21, page 1. And we're actually going to finish this book on this session. Chapter 21. We're going to be talking about property management, and this book does an exceptional job on property management. They are really, really good in this. And we're talking about state statutes here. It's not something the Real Estate Commission made up and hope for the best. It's actual state statutes we'll be looking at here. So with that in mind, look at that fourth paragraph on that page. That fourth paragraph where it says occasionally, employed brokers are tempted to perform residential property management without their employing broker's knowledge or consent. An employed broker is prohibited from performing residential property management outside of the knowledge and supervision of his or her employing broker. The state statute requires all businesses to be conducted only in the licensed name of the licensed broker. And of course, this is old verbiage, because of course now we have associate broker. They're kind of interchanging that with a licensed broker. Employing brokers must be aware of their employed brokers' activities, supervise all employed brokers' activities, and maintain proper accounting of any monies obtained by the employed broker in accordance with the statute. Further, the employing broker should have a clearly written office policy as to the firm's offering of management services and outline specifically how the firm and its employees will conduct such services. We cover this office policy manual so heavy in the trust accounts part of the course that we're not going to spend a lot of time on it today. Top of page 21-2. Top of the page. Property managers face challenges of age of construction, cash flow requirements, vacancy rates, heating and cooling concerns, and electrical and plumbing needs, as well as EPA guidelines for radon, asbestos, and lead-based paint, plus both federal and state fair housing and civil rights regulations, and the state-mandated warranty of habitability and carbon monoxide detector requirements. Tell me something about carbon monoxide detectors. 15 feet from all bedrooms, upstairs and downstairs. Good. And additionally, sound management and accounting practices must be followed to avoid commingling of funds among the properties managed. And professional property managers perform a variety of functions and must be adept and must be able to advise.
Message received from Carlos Diaz. New messages.
Hold on. Start over that paragraph. Professional property managers perform a variety of functions and must be able to advise on heating, cooling, painting, decorating, roofs, pests, insurance, the sales market, and household appliances, and must know when to refer to other professionals such as financial or tax advisors or attorneys. Property managers should be adept at problem resolution, negotiations, accounting, budgeting, and sales. A working knowledge of landlord-tenant law, access to a competent attorney, effective communication skills, and the ability to organize and delegate effectively, as well as good time management skills. And I love this, stress reduction techniques. Again, are also necessary for efficient property management. While an average sales licensee may handle 2 or 3 transactions a month, A professional property manager with an inventory of 200 units may be executing 5 to 6 leases, as well as collecting and dispersing income from all 200 units every month. The dollar value of each transaction may be smaller, but the manager is most often responsible for the entire value of the property and over an extended period of time. The skills involved are equally important. A homeowner association manager may handle 1,000 units comprised of many small or several large communities. At the outset, a property manager must clearly understand the owner's needs and desires for the property. Management plans must support the owner's objectives of short or long-term ownership, long-term investment, or other income needs. As the management contract continues over time, the manager must excel at clear and proper communications with the owner. A property manager may decide to specialize in a particular type of property or to service many types. Property management specialties may include single-family homes, attached or detached, condos, townhomes, multi-level buildings, residential or offices, government-assisted housing, rental properties, shopping centers, office or industrial complexes, resort or short-term rental properties, homeowners associations, and again, that's not an exhaustive list. There's many other places, not many, but several other places you can get leads also to run your property management business. There's a lot of money in property management, and it's a good side venture for you when you're selling houses and everything to get involved in property management also. The Real Estate Commission is going to make it where if you're in property management, remember your regular deal every 3 years, you have to have how many hours? 24, of which 12 of those is the mandatory class you take every year, 4 hours every year. They want that 12 hours of classes that are electives to be in property management. They're talking about a separate licensing for property managers, and I hope they don't do it. Because what we cover in this course today is enough to make you at least know more about property management where you can make an intelligent decision whether you want to get into it or not. And also whether you want to make it the full part of your appraisal process or a fraction of it or whatever. But again, there's a lot of money to be made in property management. Yeah.
Maybe I missed that. Are you saying that out of our 24 within the 3 years, 12 hours has to be in property management?
If you're a property manager,
Oh, if you're
a property manager, you have 12 hours of mandatory and then 12 hours of electives that are strictly property management. So,
That's just if you're only a property manager, or if you intend to do that?
no, if you're only a property manager, yeah. If you are a property manager and that's all you do, is manage properties. And the reason, of course, there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. We're going to spend a lot of time in trust accounts on property management also. There's more lawsuits in property management by far than the real estate industry because we're dealing with other people's money, a lot more with other people's money than if we're not just a real estate broker, but a real estate broker. So,
So
What?
normal brokers only have 4 hours a year for continuous training, right?
each year you have to take it every year. And like I say, 24 hours altogether every 3 years. 8 hours a year, 1 day a year, it's hardly overwhelming. But guys, for the first 2 years, that's nowhere near enough to what you need. You need to get more training than that. You've got to understand the markets, know how to network yourself, know what you're doing. You got to be able to make a living after those first 2 years. Don't quit your part-time job if you have one. I suggest you don't. Work that part-time job or full-time job if you have it, and you will reach a point where you can't afford to work that job anymore because you're making so much in real estate. Then you can quit. I've had students call me up and say it worked exactly that way for me. One, Lori Delaney. I'll brag about my ex-students. She's one of the top brokers with Caldwell Banker. She was rookie of the year with Caldwell Banker. And she called me up. She was making a ton of money selling commercial furniture. And she said, boy, she said, I'm going to have to be making a lot of money before I'll give that up because I'm doing real well. it was about 7 months later, she called me up and said, I just quit my furniture job today. And she sends me, emails me deals that she's doing, sends me flyers on it. And I'll tell you what, she is cleaning up. She is doing so well. She had a $2.5 million property, both ends of it here, just a few months ago. So, you say she's doing extremely well. Okay. Let's go to bottom of that page. And what happens, you don't rule out doing property management in terms of doing resort properties. I got a call one day from this lady, a friend of mine I hadn't seen for a couple of years. And she called me up and she said, I just want to come say goodbye. I'm leaving in the morning. I said, what's going on? She said, I got a job managing a resort on the South Island of New Zealand. And they've flown me down there 3 times to make sure it was a good fit, and I'm leaving in the morning. And I said, not to be honest with you, I was speechless. I couldn't talk. I'm thinking, I've been doing this forever. I've never had an offer like that, But anyway, and she left that next morning. I haven't heard from her since. It's probably been 10 years. I don't know how long it's been. But anyway, I hope she's doing real well. But there's a whole thing that opened up for her. And this is after she had her divorce. Her kid was growing up. She was probably in her early 50s, I would think. Presented herself very well. But you young guys and ladies, you might want to consider that before you get tied down with kids and husbands and wives and everything, disappearing for a couple of years. And managing these resorts or selling timeshares overseas. That's definitely something you would want to consider, maybe. Yeah.
At some point, it doesn't have to be now, but can you talk about, because I wasn't in the class, about like moving to Costa Rica or, completely moving to a different area and buying real estate, what your thoughts are on that?
Moving to different areas and buying real estate? That's your own call.
Living there, pardon?
You mean buying resort properties? Or what?
Well, like purchasing a house in Costa Rica, whether it be an investment or living there.
Lou who comes in here, for Lou from Great Way Real Estate, a good buddy of mine. And what happened, he ended up buying 3 houses in Costa Rica a couple of years ago. He paid $750,000 for these 3 houses right on the beach, threw another $400,000 into it. And I don't know what happened this weekend with that hurricane. I have to give him a call and see. But what happened is he's renting those out for $850 a month a piece, $850 a night a piece, and he's booked, just booked. So he's not buying them. The people in there are buying them. They're paying for them anyway. It's not costing him a dime, and he'll end up the renters in there will be paying for
So
it
he's doing seasonal renting.
year round, except when he's going to use it himself. Sure, yeah.
So with international real estate, there's a lot of different legalities if you technically own it, or if you're on a 99-year lease, or if you can even buy something in that country, right?
Very much so. And of course, Costa Rica is part of the United States, so that'd be a good place to do it.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, what'd I say? Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, yeah, never mind. Anyway, but yeah, these are, you really have to be careful in these other countries. A lot of times you can't buy properties unless you're a national, you're an actual citizen of that country. But yet people can come over from any country in the United States and buy our properties all day long. Don't have to be a U.S. citizen. So again, just be careful about that. And a lot of times you're signing a long-term lease and you think you own it and you don't. So be careful of that too. It happens every day. I'll hear, often I'll hear some reports. Somebody will call me and say, yeah, I bought this property a year ago and I thought it was a long-term lease and it isn't. How do I get out of it? Well, you can't. You really can't. That's why you sign a contract like that. So, and one tip-off, guys, we went over our purchase contract, our buy and sell contract a couple sessions ago. It was 17 pages. I mean, you all stayed awake. I'm really proud of you. But I mean, it's a long, arduous affair. But I'll tell you what, my lease on my space here, the initial lease was 41 pages long. Small print, single spaced. It was a monster. And I read it and I took it to the owner of the building. I said, you got to change this. I said, there's no way you would sign this. There's no way the guy who wrote it would sign it. And he said, well, rewrite it for me. He said, I've been using it for 20 years. So I rewrote it for him. Even at that, I got it down to like 27 pages. Still a monster. And he gave it to his people who has the mortgage, and they wouldn't accept it. And so he got his attorney and myself, and we worked out another leasing agreement. Leases aren't something that you just sign because you look at them. Guys, you've got to know what's in these leases. Pretty incredible. Tell you the story, I moved in here January 1st of 2017. And what happened is I called them up a few weeks before I signed the lease agreement, and it was on a Friday afternoon. They had no open space here in this building. That was on Friday. Tuesday afternoon, Heritage College declared bankruptcy. Heritage College had 3 rooms, three floors in this building, 18,000 square feet of floor. They had 3 of them. They declared bankruptcy, and they were in 10 other states. And that was on Tuesday afternoon. So the owner of this place, you know, he just lost 18 times 3. What's that, 54,000 square feet or 5,400 square feet of livable, rentable space? No more than that. 1,800 times 3, whatever that comes out to. Anyway, 18,000 square feet on each floor times 3. Yeah, 54,000 square feet. And so I went walking in there on Tuesday morning, and he was really happy to see me. It was actually Tuesday morning they declared bankruptcy. I walked in on Wednesday morning. And boy, they were really happy to see me. See anybody who wanted to rent. And so we did, and jumped on it, and he made me a good deal. You know, he didn't give it away, but I'd been looking for a couple of years for the right place. And this place just really fit everything so well. We were over on 41st and Wadsworth. One of the biggest problems with moving is you lose a client base. Well, we didn't lose a client base. We're a mile and a half from where we were, right around the corner practically. So from that standpoint, it turned out to be a really good move. And so far, so good. I'm paying more than my other place, but I got a pretty good market price on this. But again, I'm just saying this for long-term rental. So I got a 5-year lease. Do I want a 5-year lease? I want a 5-year lease at the figure I got. I locked that in. I locked that rate in. I was looking at properties that were, anywhere from $22 to $30 a square foot net. What does that mean? Help me out. A triple net lease.
It's like utility fees.
Yes, I'm paying for my rental, which is just the beginning of it. You know, say $25 a square foot, and I pay for all the utilities, I pay for the upkeep, and I pay for the taxes. That's almost every property I looked at was. And I got this one, I'll tell you, for $17 a square foot gross, locked in. And I don't like signing long-term leases, but at that price for this property, I jumped all over it. So I've got that locked in now. I think it goes up $0.25 a square foot per year for the next 5 years. Just nothing as far as increase goes. So then with the manager of this place, the owner of this place, we help them with their website and what they're doing and everything. They're 90% rented now. So, I mean, our timing could not have been much better. But now he owes me besides, which is pretty cool, because we didn't charge him for doing it. We just helped him with this website. And now he's just glowing compared to how it was when I walked in here in December. So, anyway, I'll just give you a little background about, some of the things I've been through. And is a rental a better fit for me? It is right now. It may not be a year from now or 2 years from now. And what's happening is buildings like this, this one is such a unique one because there's nothing like this around, but this one was built in 1970. This is a very old building. But this company owns several buildings all over the United States, own them outright. And what they did is in 2015, they just completely rehabbed these buildings. I mean, these tall doors here and everything is so updated, looks so good. They spent a fortune on it. And of course, when Heritage moved out, they were just really reeling, to say the least. So anyway, knowing how to play with leases, you never know when you're going to come across one. But buildings like this is a unique one because there's nothing else around it. But the buildings I looked at before I got this one were virtually vacant. You know, buildings like this are getting to be a dinosaur. Because now the companies that needed 10,000 square feet only need 3,000 square feet. Because everybody works out of their house now. And you work on computer, your phone's a computer now, and you just don't need a lot of space. Well, I do. I believe there's still room for in-class studies. Look around. I don't know if I'm a dinosaur or an innovator, but there's only 3 schools in Colorado now that offer in-class studies like we do. When I took over this school's been in business since 1986. I took it over in 2000. So I've had it for 17 years. And when I took it over, there was 1 online school in the entire state. All the rest were in class. Now it's complete opposite. So, like I say, so far so good. I still believe that there is a market for people who want to take this class, in-class studies. So, and that's why I mentioned before, I love seeing the millennials in here, the young people, because you learned on a computer growing up. When I was going to school, we didn't have computers. We remember those. I look over at Ralph. I'm picking on a guy. I'm not looking over at the ladies over there. But they used to have those adding machines. Remember, you go like this, and then you hit the crank. That was our computer. You know, it was just a joke compared to the technology now. But anyway, so keep up with what's happening in rental markets, because you never know when you're going to jump on one. So, and do you want a long-term lease? If it's the right lease, yes, you do. But I consider 5-year lease a long-term lease. What I'm talking about are the 25 and 30-year leases. I mentioned that one student I had who brought in his paperwork that his mom and dad bought this house like 4 or 5 years before, and they had a 30-year lease, and they thought they had a 30-year mortgage. They had a 30-year lease on this property, and I looked and I said, wow, it was very well disguised. It was a total rip. These people did not have a broker looking over their shoulder to help them. And because of that, they have a property that they don't own. Morning, we're on page 21-2. Okay, so these long-term leases, I'm spending time on them, guys, because you've got to be aware of them. You're working out of your house initially, no doubt, but eventually, as your business expands, you're going to be looking for property outside of your home. You're going to just need to get away. Just need to get away. This business builds on you. Where pretty soon you're working 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week in your house, plus you're living there. You need to have an escape to get away. So, keep that in mind. Let's go over to page 21-9. Property management and leases. This page is dynamite. Everybody should have to know this page before they graduate from high school. It would save them so much grief. Let's read this. Some of you are going to be shocked at what we're going to be reading here today. Top of page 21-9. The provision of this Part 1 shall be liberally construed to implement the intent of the General Assembly to ensure the proper administration of security deposits and protect the interests of tenants and landlords. Put a star by that. Put a star by that. That's a pretty good paragraph. Okay, there they are. As used in Part 1, unless the contract otherwise requires normal wear and tear, big star by this, guys, means that deterioration which occurs based upon the use for which the rental unit is intended, without negligence, carelessness, accident, or abuse of the premises, or equipment, or chattels. What the hell's a chattel?
Personal property.
Personal property, personal T, and chattel are the same thing. It's personal property. What's one of the definitions of personal property? It's easily moved. Easily moved is the best definition. Okay. And security deposit means any advice or deposit of money regards to denomination, the primary function of which is to secure the performance of the rental agreement for residential premises or any part thereof. We'll talk about security deposit. We're going to cover that pretty heavy today. Next paragraph, return of the security deposit. This is state statute, guys. This isn't some the real estate commission made up and threw in here. It's right from the state. This is state law. A landlord shall, within 1 month after the termination of a lease or surrender and acceptance of the premises, whichever occurs last, return to the tenant the full security deposit with the landlord by the tenant, unless the lease agreement specifies a longer period of time, but not to exceed 60 days. Big star. How long does a landlord have to get you back your deposit? 1 month or 60 days. It's not 1 month or 2 months or 30 days and 60 days. It's 1 month or 60 days with an extension. Boy, don't miss that one, guys. They're going to try to get you on the state exam. Yeah.
Is there a federal number for that? I know that the number for how much time you've got differs from state to state, but is there like a federal end line?
There really isn't. There really isn't. Just like there's no federal approved contracts for sale of real estate. Every state has its own. And the federal government gave that power to each state to regulate how they want to handle their own contracts. Like in some states, I've told you guys, I've had students here from other states who say that in some states, there's different contracts for different counties. It really, really gets confusing. But in those counties, you have to have a lawyer sniffing around everything you do. Every contract has to either be written by an attorney or reviewed by an attorney, and you have to have an attorney at every closing. We don't. That's why we need to know this stuff so well.
But that's assuming that they're getting their security deposit back. But if they thrash the place.
Let's keep reading. Let's keep reading. Okay. So 1 month or 60 days. No security deposit shall be retained to cover normal wear and tear. In the event an actual cause exists for retaining any portion of the security deposit, the landlord shall provide the tenant with a written statement, big star by this, guys, with a written statement listing the exact reason for the retention of any portion of the security deposit. When the statement is delivered, it shall be accompanied by payment of the difference between any sum deposited and the amount retained. The landlord is deemed to have complied with this section by mailing said statement and any payment required to the last known address of the tenant. Nothing in this section shall preclude the landlord from retaining the security deposit for things like non-payment of rent, abandonment of the premises, non-payment utilities, repair work, etc., etc. We're on page 21.9. So the landlord sends you back half of your deposit and doesn't say why he's keeping the other half. This is what happens. The failure of the landlord to provide a written statement within the required time specified in section 1, remember 1 month or 60 days, of this action shall work a forfeiture of his right to withhold any portion of the security deposit under this section. So again, he sends you a portion of it and doesn't say why he's keeping the other part. He has to give it all back to you. He can't keep any of it. Continuing.
Does that, it has to be in writing and not verbal?
You better believe it's in writing. Yeah, what are verbal agreements worth? The paper they're not written on, right? Remember that. Everything has to be in writing. Look at this 3A. The willful retention of a security deposit in violation of this action shall render a landlord liable for treble the amount of that portion of the security deposit wrongfully withheld from the tenant, together with reasonable attorney's fees and court costs. So, 1 month or 60 days go by and the landlord hasn't set you anything. He has to give you back your security deposit plus 3 times that amount. And we'll keep reading, then we'll talk about this more. Let's keep going here. Let's look at this 3B. In any court action brought by a tenant Under this section, the landlord shall bear the burden of proving that his withholding of the security deposit or any portion of it was not wrongful. So the burden falls on the landlord, not the tenant. Let's keep going. Let's go over to page 2111. And look at kind of the third paragraph down there, guidelines for property management regarding security deposits. Everybody there? That's C, third paragraph on 2111. A manager should inspect a property prior to occupancy and document the condition of the premises. When the tenant vacates and has caused no damage other than normal wear and tear, the deposit must be returned to the tenant. Let's go back. Let's go back to page 21-9. And look at that number 1, second paragraph from the top of the page. Let's read this normal wear and tear. What is normal wear and tear? It means that deterioration which occurs based upon the use for which the rental unit is intended, without negligence, carelessness, accident, or abuse of the premises or equipment or chattels by the tenant or members of the household. What does this mean? It means that they cannot have it in your lease that you have to clean the carpet, that you have to clean the oven. That's normal wear and tear. They cannot require you to do that. And what do they want you to do? It has to be in the same condition you moved in. Bull. That's against state statute. That's actually for an illegal purpose, and you get out of that lease if you want to. How many people have been screwed around by a landlord? All of our raise a hand, at some time in our life. So how long ago has it been? Has it been years since you got messed around? You know what the statute of limitations are? From date of discovery. When did you discover this?
Right now.
Today, you've got 2 years to go after that landlord, guys, if you want to. And if it's under $7,500, which many deposits aren't. I had
Triple the amount?
Pardon me?
Triple the amount?
Triple the amount plus the deposit itself. I had a student the other day, she took me up to her place, the office she's renting, up in Old Town Arvada. Her security deposit was $2,900. And the lease ended, and the landlord never said anything. And it's been like 4 months. I said, really? 3 times $2,900 plus $2,900, not bad. Yeah.
The plus 29 apply, it says triple the amount, there is no additional.
You get your security deposit back plus treble damages.
It says liable for treble the amount of that portion of the security deposit.
Yes. Yes.
But it is plus.
Yes, the deposit is a given. He owes you that, no matter what, plus 3 times that amount for damages. What's going on?
Nothing, you're just kicking the camera around.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jim,
Yeah,
will this apply to a month-to-month rent?
will this apply to month-to-month lease? You better believe it. Yeah, month-to-month lease, same thing. How long does he have to get your deposit back, even though it's month-to-month? And most leases now are month-to-month because rents are going up so quickly these days. So you do have month-to-month leases now. If you own a property and you have a gross lease for 1 year, like I got 5 years, like I've got here, I'm happy with that 5-year gross lease. Yeah, Christine?
So, my uncle and my auntie moved out of the apartment not so long ago, and I saw them that they were patching up the holes where they had, rings or whatever. And I asked them, why are they covering them up? And like, oh, the more we cover, the more of our deposit that we'll get back. So they had to leave, but they didn't have to, but the more of the deposit that we're gonna get back.
Let's talk about this. How about holes in the wall, burns in the carpet? That's not normal wear and tear. That's beyond normal wear and tear. What is normal wear and tear? Let's read it again, guys. Number 1 up here. Means that deterioration which occurs based upon the use for which the rental unit is intended. If you got holes in your walls, big old holes in your wall, I'm not talking about picture holes,
Picture holes.
but even picture holes should be fixed also. But, you see big holes in the, from some people. That's not normal wear and tear. And they can get those fixed and charge you for that, of course.
What about chip a little bit hanger, like a hanger towel things, and take it out and still have little bit tips on the wall, So that costs like normal tear or no?
That's, yeah, if you're tearing out the towel bars in the
Yeah.
bathroom, that's not normal wear and tear.
But
That's not
still,
normal wear and tear.
but that is like only the tips still in the
So what did you
wall.
do? Tell me what you did.
I didn't do
Sounds like
anything.
You
Personal
didn't do anything.
experience.
It sounds like it to me. But, yeah, you know, if you're just pulling those out, that's not normal wear and tear. And it's not, oh, this is a big mystery to me. No, what's normal wear and tear? They can't require you to clean your carpet. They can't require you to clean your oven. Yeah, what's up?
I had a friend who just had bad tenants come into their property and leave. They destroyed the carpet and they ruined the screen door, and because they wouldn't give them the deposit back because it exceeded the amount, they came and vandalized their patio on the back of their porch. What legal action would you think?
What if that happens too, and you have the renters from hell sometimes, and they just tear the place apart, and their damage far exceeds their deposit, or just exceeds their deposit? Can you go after them and sue them? If you have it in the lease, you can, yes. But you can't just all of a sudden. See, if there's damage beyond normal wear and tear, which exceeds the security deposit, we can come after. You agree that it will be settled in court. Yeah, Monique?
I have a friend who, she had one of those Nest thermostats put in their house, just because the landlord didn't have that in, they put it in, then they took it out when they left. And, the landlord said that she wasn't returning they got $300 back from my computer, almost $2,000. Because she said she had to replace the air conditioning, and she had to do landscaping in the yard, which my friend's husband took great care of Bourbon, and it was horrible. It was like weeds up to here when they first moved in, and he brought it back to really green grass and everything. But she said that she wasn't returning it because of the air conditioning, and because they took the Nest with them, which was personal property, right?
Sure.
If they installed it.
And if you didn't hear that on the mic here, and this is another common story where the guy was keeping up the landscape and everything. Now the landlord is putting in extra landscaping or whatever and charging you for that. Is that normal wear and tear? What did that landscaping look like when you moved in? And if it's in the same condition, they can't keep that deposit. And so let's say that they sent you back, they kept 1/3 of the deposit and sent you back the rest, and they had a detailed outline as to why they kept it, and you don't agree with it. You go to court. Now, hopefully it's in small claims court. That student I told you about where she had $2,900 in security deposit, she can't go to small claims court. So it's going to be 3 times that plus the $2,900. You know, she's looking at upwards of $12,000. Small claims court is under $7,500. So, and that changes occasionally too. Yeah.
How long is that property management company supposed to keep your records for? I was returned a deposit of $500, but we're talking 20 years ago. Would I go to that office or?
How long are they supposed to keep the records? The IRS says 7 years. And how long do we as property managers in Colorado? 4 years. 4 years. But you better keep them for at least 7. 20 years, you really can't do much about that because after 7 years, it's called set aside, where you can't do anything with it. So, and again, make sure your leases say what you want them to say. And have somebody else do. Remember, there's no approved leases in Colorado. You can do a lease on a Safeway bag if you want to. But make sure you're saying what you want to say, that you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your people, whatever. Yeah, don't end up in court. Try to do things to avoid court, needless to say. And a real estate attorney could draw up a lease for you. If you have a property management company that's pretty good sized, you'd better have an attorney draw up your initial leases. Can he draw up a lease that you can use from now on? Yes, he can. You can't do that in the real estate industry. I'm qualifying this, guys. For a property management lease, yes, he can draw up a lease that you can use from now on. A real estate lease, no. Or excuse me, a real estate sales contract, we have to use the approved form. So we have this one deal where the attorney draws up a brand-new contract on our purchase that's only good for that one deal. We can't use it from then on. That question's on the state exam, guys. It's on the state exam.
The what?
He can't use it for the general use of the office. They like that word general. We have an attorney draw up a contract for the general use of the office. Confusing the way it's worded. What that means is that we got this attorney to draw one up we can use from now on. Not in purchases, but we can in leases. Because there's no approved contract for leases. Does that make sense? Hope that's not too confusing.
I'm a little bit confused, because there's a standard contract for a purchase, right? Like we just went over, that 17-page contract?
Yeah.
Okay, so you said an attorney can draw that up, but then you can't use it. What, I mean, you gotta
No,
reiterate.
we have a attorney drawing up a new sales contract for us for that one deal. For that one deal. We can't use that contract from now on. It can only be transaction specific to that one deal.
What would warrant a transaction-specific contract to be drawn up? What would be the reason for that?
I have a owner will carry.
Okay.
There's no approved forms for owner will carry as one. Or maybe it's a very involved contract that involves several properties. Could be anything. And the buy and sell contract just isn't strong enough. I want a good, competent real estate attorney. Guys, you don't have to hire a real estate attorney to do up your contracts. You should. But any attorney can draw up contracts. But a real estate attorney knows real estate contracts, hopefully. So again, 3 years, and again, it's 2 years from discovery, 3 years if there's fraud involved. So you've got plenty of time to go after those landlords if you want to.
And this is Colorado specific. right?
Yes, every state is specific to that state. This is Colorado specific. But the definition of normal wear and tear is universal as far as the United States goes.
What does month-to-month lease?
What does month-to-month mean? I said, if you're smart, in this market now, you should have a month-to-month lease, where you renegotiate the lease at the end of every month. Where if the rent's gone up in your area, you can get a higher rental on it. And you tell your renters, hey, I'm going to have a month-to-month lease at such amount, but at the end of every month, I have a right to raise the rent if I want to. And yeah, you can't do anything about it if you sign a month-to-month lease. So in this market, another question on the state exam, what type of lease is best for the tenant in an appreciating rental market? And the answer, of course, is a gross lease, where it's the same every month. I have a 6-month lease, I have a 1-year lease. That's what I want in this market we have right now, because rentals are going up every month.
So for rental, the apartment to live, so sign the 1 year or 2 years lease much better than month to month, right?
Yes, and
As long
remember,
as you're gonna stay there.
as long as you're gonna, and can you have it
Lock
where
you
you,
into that.
can you sublease it, or can you assign it? There's a difference between subletting and assigning. So I want to sublet. So I come up to you and I say, would you like to rent my property? I'm going to allow you to sublet from me. In that case, I remain primarily liable. You make your checks out to me. You never even meet the landlord, and I give the checks to the landlord. That is, again, a sublease, or an assignment is where you just take over my lease. You actually take my place. You become primarily liable. I'm secondarily liable, but you're primarily liable. You make your payments directly to the landlord.
Oh.
So that's subletting and assigning. An assignment is known as, what is that thing? A substitution for a contract, or a person for a person? What's that word? New person for a new person, new contract for an old contract. Novation, good. That's Latin. Nova is Latin for new. You will have that question on the exam, guys. Probably a couple different ways. If you have novation in the question, look for new in the answer. If you see new in the question, look for novation in the answer. And we're gonna hit you with that. You'll be ready for it, because you will have at least a couple questions on novation. Kind of remember that for the exam. You'll probably never see that word again. But for the,
The difference between assignment and sublease is one is direct with,
an assignment, that person takes over my position, essentially. They become me. They are now primarily liable to the landlord. I'm still secondarily liable. Yeah.
That would be, if you didn't sign a new lease, you would assume that, and you wouldn't have to go through the whole process of signing a new lease agreement if you were doing that way, or?
Well, yeah, if I had, what does the assignment mean? See, and you want that drawn out in a lease also. Most tenants don't even think about assigning that lease or think about subletting that lease. What if all of a sudden you lose your job and you can't afford that higher rent? You got a nice, beautiful place downtown Denver. You know, it's $3,500, $4,000 a month in a lease or more. Highest rent I've seen down in Denver was this one guy I know, $9,800 a month was his lease in downtown Denver. There's some nice properties down there. What's that?
Friends came over and said, I love this place. I would be willing to pay 15 grand a month for this place. You could step in the middle and say, well, move on in.
Cool, you betcha. If in your lease you're allowed to sublet. Now, what I do in my leases, I never lease. You know, the last time I leased a property was the other place I had. The landlord here, the owner here said, why don't you use one of your leases you always use? I said, I never lease properties. And so when you're doing a lease, you're kind of out of practice usually, unless you're a property manager and understand it. And you don't even think about novation. You don't even think about subletting or assigning a lease. That's why you want to get an attorney involved, or at least someone who, in your office, who's in property management, to kind of look over that lease, guys. Two heads are usually better than one, not always, but usually better than one. Yeah.
I'm still confused the difference between assignment and sublease.
Assignment, the question is the difference between an assignment and a sublease. A sublease, I'm the tenant, I remain primarily responsible. I let someone sublease from me. They're not subletting from the owner, they're subletting from me. They make their payments to me and I give them to the landlord. And usually in a sublease or an assignment, the landlord, I give the landlord permission, or you want to give the landlord permission to interview the people, make sure they've got the right people in there. And so, and a lot of landlords forget to do that. And they'll allow subletting or assignment, and you get, you know, who knows in there? Ted Bundy moves in. You know, you just have to be really careful. Where an assignment is different. They take over my position. They are now primarily liable. I'm still secondarily liable, but they are primarily liable.
And then they're working directly with the landlord.
They're working directly with the landlord, not with me now. That's an assignment. An assignment is a novation. Not a pure novation, because I still have my feet in the deal. I wish I didn't, but I do. That's just how a typical novation works when it comes to assigning a lease. Now, what I'll do sometimes, let's say I'm going to buy this property. Man, what did he use? Anyway. And, you know, let's say it's worth $250,000. And I buy it for $200,000. And it needs, say, $20,000 worth of work. So I'm going to buy it for $200,000, throw $20,000 into it, and have $30,000 of blue sky, $30,000 worth of equity. Well, I go ahead and I just say, who would like to take over this contract? Remember, I bought it for $200,000, and I sell it for, say, $215,000. So I make $15,000 for doing nothing. I just assign that contract. They take over the whole deal. I'm not secondarily liable at all. I made my money when I assigned the contract to these people.
Wouldn't that be like just selling the house to them?
Exactly. I'm selling them the house. I'm selling them my contract, is what I'm doing. And these people could be contractors, flippers, or they could be people who maybe want to do, what's that FHA loan? Construction loan for FHA? 203K, very good, you remember, 203K, where the people can go ahead and get a construction loan on it and have built-in equity on this property.
So you're talking, this is gonna be something that happens within 45 days of them accepting your contract and then you flipping the contract, essentially, instead of flipping the house, you're flipping.
I'm flipping the contract, you can use that word, yeah.
Yes, I mean,
I'm flipping the contract, and a lot of investors do that. They don't work on the property, they just flip the contract. Noah and I were at lunch last week, and his father-in-law does this often, he said, where he just assigns a contract. His father-in-law owns over 200 houses.
So how would you market that contract? I mean, would you leave the house on the market for that 45 days? And if somebody wants to buy it, then that's.
Well, I have my outlets usually. You know, I run in those circles. You know, I buy contracts, or I'm a flipper. Like right now, the flip market in Denver's not dynamite. It's not like it used to be. But I guess Noah's father-in-law, he still does what, 10 a month, you said?
10 to 12.
10, 12 a month. So he knows his market. He knows how to play that game. He wasn't always rich. He said he worked in a shoe store for a while and
Mowed lawns?
mowed lawns, just like all of us, you know. I remember I used to mow lawns, you know, $2 with my brother. He made $1 and I made $1. I'm glad to get it, you know. Back in the old day, I remember I used to live on the tennis courts down at Sloan's Lake and at Berkeley. That's where I lived. You get a can of tennis balls for $2. You have to mow a lawn just to buy a can of tennis balls, you know, things like that you look back on. So, anyway, so again, so I can assign a sales contract, I can assign a lease. In the sales contract, you have to have a statement in there that allows me to assign that contract. And that has to be part of that contract.
Otherwise, you won't sign a lease with that particular person? No deal breaker right there?
No, I'm talking about the sales contract, there's no lease. Right, this contract is assignable, not assumable, assignable. Where they're gonna take over my contract, I have a right to sell this contract for anything I wanna sell it for, yeah.
If there's not an exclusion from being able to sublease or assign something, would the person who's leasing be able to do that?
Very good question. What if there's nothing said about subleasing or assignment in a lease? Guys, when you have a lease, you want to go online and at least pull up a template for a lease if you want to do them yourself. And a good template will also have subletting and assigning as part of it. But there's no mention of subletting or assignment, and you have somebody who wants to take over your lease or you want to sublet, you have to get the landowner's approval for it. And they might say, sure, I don't care. Yeah.
Just one thing on that sublease of your lease, it's getting to be an issue, especially with like HomeAway and Airbnb. It's getting to be a big issue with that, where these tenants are in a lease in an apartment complex, but they're subleasing for the weekend for these Airbnb, and it's turning into kind of a nightmare. Like in a couple of years, there's going to be no subleasing of that.
Well, first of all,
but most of the complexes are not.
You're not gonna lease a building to put in an Airbnb. You're gonna buy it, and then have your own sublets. And is that subleasing? Of course you are. You can call that subleasing if you want to. I'm subleasing for a night.
I'm talking about normal leasees.
Just regular properties.
Well, I mean, we weren't supposed to. It's only wrong if you get caught, but we just Airbnb'd an apartment that we had downtown for a whole month.
Sure.
We weren't supposed to, but we did.
That you had a lease on?
Yeah, we signed a 3-month lease for
Yeah.
my wife, because she moved out here first. But then when I moved out here, we got a place in Sloan's Lake, so we Airbnb'd that place for a month, yeah. Covered the rent for that month, plus $400.
Sure. Good.
So short-term's there, but
Yeah.
it's
It's-
not normally allowed.
Yeah,
It's
but
gotta
see,
be
Denver's
more.
rental market is so insane that you can do just about anything you want to do, but try to get the landlord's permission so you don't have to any roadblocks. So, but is this interesting, guys? This is something, like I say, most of us aren't going to be renting anymore or leasing, but your kids are, your grandkids are, and signing on that dotted line for them or making sure that their contracts are good contracts, good solid contracts. You know, you're taking care of your people. Let's do this. Let's go to page 2111. And look at city ordinance, the second paragraph, city ordinances concerning security deposits. The city of Boulder, good old Boulder. In Boulder, security deposits have to be paid a fee for that. There has to be an interest paid on security deposits. I had a lady in my night class who has a property management company in Boulder. Who's in Boulder now? Anybody doing property management? I didn't think I've asked that before. I don't think there is anybody in here. But they told me that it's like 0.3%. So it's pretty much what market is. So and they try to keep it at market, but Boulder's the only city, not the city and county of Boulder, not in Longmont or Louisville, but city and county of Boulder, you have to pay interest on a security deposit. I got a call from this one property management company. They said, they still have that on the books? You have to pay them that? Yeah, I said, yeah, it sure is. She said, really? He said, I've got a lady who's been in this apartment for 22 years and she's moving out and we owe her like $18,000 and we didn't escrow for it or anything. I said, man, you know, you're go negotiate with her, but if I were her, I wouldn't negotiate, you know. You can make payments, do whatever, but you owe me $18,000. Okay.
That's horrible.
Wouldn't it
Depends
ruin-
on which side you're on.
Yeah, depends what side you're on, yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
gonna be on the test?
On the test with Boulder? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You could see a question on the test about that, about Boulder. Having to pay interest on security deposits.
1/3%?
That's what the lady
Market-
told me it is,
market rate.
and I'm sure it goes up and down, you know, so. And there is no real market because it's the only animal there is that does this, so. They could probably get whatever the market will bear, little or high. But they say a market rate, but how do you figure a market rate? Because they're the only ones who have interest on a security deposit, so. Anyway, let's not build that into more than it is. Just bottom line, you have to pay interest on security deposits in Boulder.
Boulder's always different.
Let's go to page 2112. Talking about leases again. I like this definition on the third paragraph on 2112. A lease is both a contract and a conveyance. It sets forth the terms of the agreement between the parties, the landlord and the tenant, lessor and lessee, whereby the right to possess and use the property for a certain period of time is transferred from one to the other. The interest in the property transferred may be nominal, such as a lease for 1 month, or it may be very substantial, like a 99-year lease. A lease for 1 year or less may be verbal through what?
That will?
Statute
Oh,
of frauds, statute of frauds. You remember, all contracts for real property must be in writing, or they're void to the statute of frauds. And one exception is the lease for a year or less may be verbal to accommodate, look 3 paragraphs down there, tenancy for years. Tenancy for years. You have a buddy staying in your basement or whatever. It's just a verbal agreement. But all other leases have to be in writing. Well, you want them in writing. I have a 6-month lease. Can I have a verbal 6-month lease? Sure I can. But that'd be foolish on both parties' sides.
Isn't it just a tenancy at will? Yeah.
No, this is to accommodate tenancy at will, which tends to not be in writing,
Oh,
okay?
okay.
But if you have a 1-month lease, or a 2-month lease, or a year, whatever, you better have that in writing. Because that, you know, that's a business. You know, my buddy Joe staying in my basement, that's not a business, I'm doing a friend a favor. So, continuing here. A lease for 1 year or less may be oral. A lease for longer than 1 year is required to be in writing to be enforceable under that statute of frauds. That's not fraud, that's the statute of frauds. A written lease is always preferable because it furnishes objective proof of the tenants of the terms agreed to by the parties. I like this definition. A lease is an agreement between a lessor and a lessee whereby the lessee takes possession and receives the use and profits of an estate in real property for a certain period of time, in return for which the lessor receives the lessee's performance and payment according to the conditions of the agreement. Very, very well-written definition of a lease. And then we have our leasehold tenancies and a tenancy for years. A tenancy for years, of course, is a long-term lease. A tenancy at will, I misspoke. A tenancy at will on top of the next page is the one that you're not going to have a written contract, written lease on, possibly, a tenancy at will. But a tenancy for years, you want it in writing, and it doesn't have to be for years. It could be for a day or a week or a month or whatever, or for many years. But it has a definite beginning, definite ending date. Yeah.
See this 99-year lease number come up a bunch of times. Is there a rule that prevents you from offering a lease longer than 99 years?
You know, is there anything that says you can have longer than a 99-year lease? Sure, you can. But usually 99-year lease is kind of like the standard for a long-term lease. So, and you see these countries having long-term leases with cities and countries sometimes.
Do we need to memorize that, the leasehold tenancies, the 1, 2, 3, and 4? Is that on the test? Those are all test questions.
1, 2, and 3, and 4. Oh, that right there? Yes, you got to know these. Got to know these guys. Forget the test. You got to know this stuff. You need it for the test too. But you have tenancy, but a tenancy for years has a definite beginning and definite ending date. Tenancy for years, definite beginning, definite ending date. And then we have periodic tenancy. Remember, I have a 6-month lease, that's a tenancy for years, and when it ends, it rolls over into a month-to-month. That month-to-month doesn't have a definite ending period, so that's a periodic tenancy. So I have both tenancies there. I have again, tenancy for years, which is the 6-month lease, doesn't have to be for years. And then it rolls over to a periodic tenancy, or tenancy from period to period, you might hear it called. Then at the top of the next page is tenancy at will, where I may have a friend who's, you know, you call up your friend, Mary, I see you're coming into town, why don't you stay in my basement, something like that, to get on your feet. You're probably not going to have a lease with them. So they're staying in your basement. Now there's several things that can terminate a tenancy at will. The number one guaranteed on the test is 3-day notice of eviction. Guaranteed, 3-day notice of eviction. Death of the parties. Death of the parties. Destruction of the premises. Destruction of the premises. Sale of the premises unless other arrangements are made. So again, a 3-day notice of eviction. Death of the parties. Death of the parties. Destruction of the property. Or sale of the property unless other arrangements are made. So, again, what can end a tenancy at will, guys? And they're tricky. You're going to have 2 or 3 questions on this tenancy at will. They like to attack those questions. It can be the death of the parties, destruction of the premises, or sale of the premises unless other arrangements are made, or a 3-day notice of eviction. So 4 ways you can end a tenancy at will. The one you will definitely have on the test is that 3-day notice of eviction. You'll have those questions on your finals. You'll be ready. Yeah?
Quick question for you. So if, let's say I was thinking of selling my property in the next 5 to 7 months, and I have a tenant, but I want to, we talked about a sales clause in terms of that. Let's say I didn't have that or didn't want to put that in there. I mean, I guess, would you use a periodic tenancy or a tenancy at will to go month to month until the sale of the property? Or would you just do a periodic tenancy?
Well, it all depends, Miles. Are you doing it on a month-to-month, it ends at the end of every month? Or do I want a periodic tenancy where it just is a periodic tenancy? You don't have a definite time where it ends every month. It just rolls over to another month. You can have that too. but it rolls over to another month, but you have an option of raising the rent 5%. So you can put anything you want to put in a lease contract as long as it's legal, and the parties agree.
Is it,
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty common, like if you're doing a month-to-month, to have, whether, I mean, you define it, a 30-day notice by the tenant or a 60-day notice, so you know, you have time as a landlord too, to say, okay, they're gonna be out
Yeah.
in 60 days, and I have 60 days to start looking for someone else.
We're gonna look at that in just a few minutes. I love when you're ahead of me about what you can have in these leases.
Month to month, we can like 30 days or depending on the month, how many days a month? So because some
Well,
months
whatever-
is like 28 days, some months is 31 days, so.
Yeah, and what are you gonna do? You're gonna have, if there's more days in January than February. Does that mean you're gonna charge more
More
rent for
living.
January? No, that gets too complicated. It's just a set amount per month.
Yeah, because I heard that one time, it's like it's like, this month's only 28 days, and oh, how come last month is like 31 days? That is like not fair for the, like, pay the same amount for the same
And if
monthly
somebody,
rental.
and you could have a banker's year too. We're gonna get into that one if you've had closings. You guys know what a banker's year is very well. Where every month has 30 days in it. A lot of states work on a banker's year. There's only 5 days difference, so, but it's more succinct. Okay, let's keep going, guys. Talking about ground leases, long-term ground leases. On page 2113, kind of the middle of the page, a ground lease. A ground lease is a tenancy for years whereby a parcel of unimproved land is let for a typically extended period of time. This usually allows the building to be erected on the land by the tenant and provides for the disposition of the building at the end of the lease. Big star by this next sentence. The landowner may become entitled to the building. I built $1 million house on this 30-year lease. My lease ends and there's nothing in my lease for renewal. The building, upon payment of all part or none of the value of the building, depending upon the agreement. So that landlord can get my $1 million house for nothing, free house, because he owns the land. And my lease ends, it goes back to the landlord, and he can take over my property and my $1 million house with or without any payment at all, whatever's in the lease.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not gonna CYA on that, then you get what you get, you know.
Yeah, you gotta, in lease contracts, it's you're not gonna have a 41-page lease contract, typically. It's gonna be, 3 or 4 pages. There's no reason why you shouldn't know what's in that lease. And you can add to it, take things out, retype it, whatever you want to, because there's no approved lease for the state of Colorado. You should have an attorney helping you, a real estate attorney. Any attorney can drop contracts. You want a real estate attorney. There's a difference. Let's keep going. And the building legally becomes real property and belongs to the landlord, who is not required to reimburse the tenant. Next paragraph. A long-term ground lease can offer considerable advantages to a tenant when land values run as high as $10,000 or more per front foot. What the heck's that mean? We're in downtown Denver. And what happens is I've got a building and it's 100 feet by 100 feet, so it's 10,000 square feet, okay? And it becomes so valuable that it's not priced per square foot, but rather front foot. And I've got 100 front feet here. And the value of this building is $100 per front foot. And when you get properties like in downtown Denver or areas in a high-end rental, that's exactly what happens. You're actually pricing it in its cost per front foot. When I was just got my license, I was waiting tables, and a couple other waiters who were buddies with me, and we'd be partners in our stations and everything. And so I got my broker's license, and we were going to be big shot investors. So we had this one property that was in the MLS right outside of downtown Denver, $9,500. And so we talked about it, and we thought, well, shoot, I don't know if it's worth that or not. So we offered him like $9,200. And the guy called me up the next day and he said, are you feeling okay? I said, yes, I am. I'm a big shot investor, you know. And he said, you offered me $9,200 for this property. I said, yes, we did. And they said, it's $95,000. We thought it was $9,500. And we even dropped that down. A big shot investor. That was my first time I ever made an offer on a deal. Just crazy. Crazy. So if you make mistakes that don't cost you anything, that didn't cost me anything, you know?
No, except for your pride.
My pride, yeah. I've lost that many times. That's okay. I can lose
So
that.
we all have.
You bet. Let's look at the very last paragraph on 2113. A long-term ground lease holds another advantage for an owner of valuable land lacking sufficient finances to develop it. An owner may induce a tenant to make suitable improvements by means of rent concessions. With appropriate improvements, the fee holder's land will increase in value. With the increased benefit, the owner at the end of the lease. And such leases often provide for the increase in value to be matched by increased ground rent at suitable intervals. This is known as a step-up lease or graduated lease. Write this above that. A graduated lease, draw an arrow or something. Graduated lease is like a grand opening special. It's starting very low, and as more people move in, it goes up. When more people move in, it goes up. That's what a graduated lease is a grand opening special. Boy, don't miss that. You will have that on the state exam. Hopefully a light will come on and you'll nail it. Okay, guys, why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break, then we'll come back.
No, I got reservation, sorry.
Okay, guys, keep rocking here. During the break, I was talking with Chad, and he was talking about how, he said, I don't know if I remember that test tomorrow. I've only started this class like 4 days ago. Nobody's taken this class yet. No one in here has taken this class yet. Unless you're sitting through the entire course the second time. So you're all in the same boat. So hopefully you're working on that test for tomorrow, because that's what we're going to do tomorrow, is that test, 125 questions. One of the most important days of the whole course. So
Do it tonight. Are we being graded on that, or are we just going through the answers?
you're going to go through the answers, and you have to pass it before you turn it in, and you have to turn it in. And you're all going to flunk it, I hope. You know, I developed the test so you flunk it. I'm not to be mean.
I think that's pretty mean though.
That's not mean. What that does, if every question you meet here in class, you're not going to miss on that state exam. And when you're taking this test, guys, that we're going to go over in classes, don't guess at an answer. If you're not 100% sure, leave it blank. Because what if you think you know it, you don't know what but you guess and get it right, then you think you know it and you don't. Okay, so I'd rather you just miss it. Okay? And because every question that you miss here, you're not going to miss in that state exam. We learn from mistakes. I wish there was a better way to learn than by our mistakes, but that's how we learn best. So, on page 2114, second paragraph talks about a percentage lease. This is what we use for retail, for shopping centers. The one they like on the state exam, of course, is that an example of a percentage lease would be like an art gallery. They like that as an example. I have a set amount per month plus a percentage of my gross sales. Tricky question. So this is an example of a gross lease. Well, it's a percentage of my gross sales. It must be a gross lease. No. It's a percentage of my gross sales. I have a set amount plus a percentage of whatever I'm selling. And it's not a percentage of your net sales, it's a percentage of your gross sales. You can play too many games with your net sales. You can play enough games with your gross sales. But again, a set amount per month plus a percentage of your gross sales. That's how we use That's what they use in shopping centers, any type of retail spaces.
So that's kind of messed up. The more money that company makes, the more you have to pay for that lease.
The more that's just it. And so I signed this percentage lease, and
That seems so.
yeah,
wrong.
and that can, and both those figures can go up. So I've got a business that's doing pretty good, or maybe I'm just finally breaking even. The next month they bump the rent and the gross up on the gross sales amount. You know, you have to really be careful when you're leasing on a percentage basis.
Seems like.
Do many people even do that?
Oh, everybody does it
Like a
pretty
retail
much.
store in a mall?
And if you have a store, retail store, yes. In a shopping mall or whatever, those are typically, all of them are percentage leases. So the landlord gets a cut of the deal, essentially.
But it's to his benefit to promote your business because he gets a cut.
Exactly. Now, but you have to have it set up, well, what about returns? Then we have to take that away from him and this and that. It's a very complicated lease if it's done correctly, because there's a whole lot of variables. Jay, he was in the other day, Jay Williams. He, a buddy of mine, he's the only man I've ever met who has made and lost $1 billion on his own merit. His first business he had when he was 11 years old. And what he would do, the stories he tells, and you have to believe, it's no fun unless you believe him, you know. But what he would do, he said when he would buy an old dilapidated shopping center that nobody was renting, it was virtually vacant, ready to get torn down. And he would buy it, he'd rehab it, get it all in there, and then he would set people up in their own businesses in there. Their own liquor store, their own prescription, whatever, drugstore, whatever. And he would fill up that shopping center, and they would pay incredibly high rentals to him. Well, but they got the business for nothing. And so he bought the building, fixed it up, put the people in there, bought all their inventory for them, and let them rent it for a year or two, never over 3 years. And all of a sudden this shopping center is showing a really good return, and he'd sell it for $3-4 million and make millions off these. And he said he did that many times. And he said recently he's been past every one of those shopping centers he did that to. He was here in Denver. And in every case, 80% of those people were still in there, even from 20, 25 years ago. And I thought, who would have thought of that? What a slick thing to do. And his outpour was next to nothing, really. And he set people up in their own business, made dreams for people, on and on. Interesting guy. Next time he's in, I'm going to have him come in. I'll tell you a story or two. I'll tell him not to talk about the whorehouses, excuse me, that they used to own, and excuse me, but they were. What was I going to call them? Anyway.
Is that his startup money?
It was startup money, yeah. When he was, but it's pretty amazing. And he'd talk about I made 10 million on this deal, 15 on that deal, and on and on. I lost $1 million on that one.
2 quick questions. Do you do property management? Do you have homes you lease out to people? And if you do you require them to have rent insurance, not renter's insurance, but rent insurance?
You always want to have rental insurance whenever you're running a place. And a good landlord will require it. Say, well, that's to protect me, not to protect you. No, it's really a two-way street. That's a really good question, Steve. I'm glad you asked
For sure,
that.
it's $12 a month.
It's not, well, no, more than that. Quite a bit more than that. Like the one I have here.
Well, what is that the difference between renter's insurance and rent insurance?
No, this is a rental insurance policy, and it covers you can have it cover workman's comp even on this renter's insurance. So you can get as involved as you want it to be. But this is a really good question. Where is it going to go when you first asked it? Do I have rental properties, guys? I have never kept a property and rented it out. You've got to know. I've always flipped my properties, and the main reason is because you got to know your limitations. I know if I went to collect the rent and it turned out to be a single parent and they were short on their rent that month, not only would I not get the rent, I'd probably give them $100 for groceries. You know, I'd be broke in a year. So you got to know your limitations. Anyway, I'm not like your father-in-law. You know, I'm sure that I'm sure he had those moments too, where he did things that
Every
happened.
month.
Every month with, yeah, I think you told me that he's very reasonable and everything, yeah. And that's how you do that. You know, things like that, to be as prosperous and successful as he is, you have to do a lot of things right. You really do. So, that's my own personal preference. Do I wish I would have kept property when the 90s, guys, what happened is, you know, I know real estate. And 90s, everybody in our business made a ton of money. And a lot of my friends, I was on the board of directors. Hugh Vallalay was in the other day. He and I were on the board of directors of the College Association of Mortgage Brokers for a while together. But what happened is most of my buddies invested in real estate. But a lot of my buddies did what I did. The tech market was going nuts. You couldn't miss. When Apple was going crazy, you know, Microsoft, everything. So instead of going into real estate, something I know, I went into the tech market. And it was going up like crazy. And then Clinton, in the middle of the year 2000, went after Microsoft, and that entire market crashed. I lost half of everything I had the first day, and I thought, well, should I sell it? I said, no, you really can't. Just write it out. I lost half of what was left the next day. I lost $300,000 in 2 days. And what happened, the people who had the real estate, what happened to them? 2007, 2008, 2009, where they were upside down on these properties. And some of them had a negative cash flow, but they held on to them. Well, most of them held on to them. And now look at them. They are looking good. Is that what happened to you?
Well, we're still riding it a little bit, but
Yeah.
I mean, we came close to bankruptcy, but we made it through it.
Boy, I tell you what. And, you know, like I say, what would I have done if I was in real estate in 2008, 2009, 2010? Would I have panicked and sold all those houses at a loss? A lot of people did. So again, you know, we just don't have a real good crystal ball. Anybody want to invent one? Put me down. I'll buy it. You bet.
Stocks is like that, you know, oh man, it's crazy. We were thinking it was going down just a couple of weeks ago, like, oh. In fact, then it went down way below what we bought it for. We thought, you know, let's just hold on to it. And it kept going down and go, we're stupid, let's just get rid of it. And now it's going back up.
You're talking stock, just
Yeah.
general stock? Guys, can we spend a little time on that? Okay. Yeah, you know, stocks. First of all, stocks are more overvalued than they've ever been. We've never had an up market this long in the history of our country. A year and a half ago, in the part of the financing course, where I go all the way back to 1906, those of you who've heard it, probably the best couple hours of the entire course. And I used to say, and I still do, if you've got stocks, sell them. I'll tell you what, this market is going to crash. It will crash. It's way overdue for crashing. And, pardon me? Ralph? But guys, what about the people who I told that to a year and a half ago?
Yeah, they would have lost like 15%, because a lot of things have been, I mean, like
Yeah.
a good mutual fund is between 15 and 17% right now.
Oh, it's crazy what they've done, but it's all smoke and mirrors. It's an artificial market out there.
Short the index?
Pardon
An
me?
index?
The what now?
Wouldn't that make it a good time to shorten index?
Don't do your shorts yet. It's very expensive to do shorts. And you can only do very short term. I don't know.
So are you in all cash right now?
I'm all cash,
Are you?
whatever that's worth, you
Yeah.
know. Actually, what's happening with everything, go into gold. But I tell you, when we attack North Korea, and we will, maybe this afternoon, who knows? We have to do it. And those of you listening on this DVD already know that we have attacked North Korea. At this point, it hasn't, but we have to. The longer we wait, the more powerful that guy's going to be. Anyway, that's going to happen, and gold's just going to soar. Bitcoins. Anybody here not heard of Bitcoins?
It just crashed.
Pardon me?
It just crashed.
Oh, there's several
China.
different types of Bitcoins out there. And again, what is that? It's an artificial currency.
So is money, so is dollars.
There we go. Exactly. Our money is artificial. What's back in our money? The paper it's printed on. You know, literally. So, again, that's just a little preview of when we talk about the history of financing in this country. And we will talk about that in another week or two with you guys. Okay, let's keep rocking here, guys. 2114.
We know it all already.
You know it all? I might as well skip that day, huh?
Well, that's
We
the
will
class
be
we
here.
took.
Oh, that's right, you guys were here, that's right.
You've only got us, what, till Wednesday, I think? And that's it?
It's about a 3-hour talk I give on that, and then we get into financing and the different types of finance, like how to, okay, let's do this. You ready, guys?
Yeah,
What are the qualifying ratios for conforming conventional product?
2836.
What are the qualifying ratios for conforming FHA product? 2941, very good, I like it. What's a conforming product?
400.
No, a conforming product means market rate. Conforming means market rate. Why don't they just say market rate, you know? But where you get the best rate you can get. And those are the qualifying ratios. If you haven't had it yet, guys, don't panic. You're going to get it, okay? Things like that.
What's conforming rate?
Market rate, for a market rate. Like I got these people, we closed January 31st, $350,000 house. I was able to get them in that house for $1,000, total out of pocket. We financed everything else. And anyway, but their rate was like 5.5%, when everybody else was getting the 3.5%. Well, they didn't get a market rate because they got a super deal. They were cash poor at the time. So the interest was not that big a deal, but they had enough equity in that property where now they're refinancing it. They had an FHA loan, they're going to change it to a conventional loan. Why do they want to do a conventional loan now? Because what?
Drop off the PMI?
Get rid of the PMI, the MIP, you know, FHA, it's MIP. And get rid of that, because now they have over 20% equity. Now they can refinance that and get rid of that MIP. And pull a few bucks out. So, again, buying correctly. And they did. They had to bite the bullet, but even 5.5% interest. Well, we're just spoiled now. I think I told you on my first home I bought, the interest rate was 13%, and I got an 11% rate. I thought I just beat the market. I was so proud. Got an 11% interest. You know, it was a different world, different world. And then we have a sky lease, where you're actually leasing or purchasing airspace above a property. Remember, all of the tramways in Chicago are actually sky leases. And everybody who owns that property underneath those tramways gets a check every month from the tramway company.
How come they don't just do eminent domain on that? On the
Why don't they really? They probably tried it one time, you know. And who probably owns all that land underneath it? The skyway companies. You know, we're talking Chicago guys, I mean, come on. Anyway, let's not go there, let's not go there.
They get to give themselves a payment tax-free every month?
Yeah, that's right, oh sure, they pay themselves, yeah, probably. I'm surmising, I don't know. Al Capone is dead, but
His legacy lives
his
on.
legacy lives on. The bank accounts are still there, yeah. Okay, guys, then we have a net lease, we talked about this earlier. We have a net lease, that's where we have a set amount, and then we subsidize the owner's expenses. We have a set amount, we pay the taxes, that's a net lease. We have a set amount, we pay the taxes and the upkeep. That's a net lease. We have a set amount, we pay the taxes, the upkeep, and the utilities. That's a net, or triple net lease. Triple net lease.
That's where the occupant of the building pays all that stuff?
The occupant subsidizes the owner's expenses, is the best way to say that. And a percentage lease could also be a triple net lease. Okay, so that's a net lease. Let's go to the page 2115, I should say. That second, right below that first paragraph, a gross lease. That's just a set amount every month. You have a 6-month set lease every month for the next 6 months or for a year. Remember, I told you that question. What is the best type of lease for a tenant to have during an inflationary period? A gross lease. Because it's the same amount, say, for a full year, even though rents are going up. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you had gotten a gross lease on this property here.
Yes.
But that your rents go up, quarter per square foot? What would that?
Yeah,
cost?
my rents, next year on January 1st, it'll go up from $17 to $17.25.
So that's not a net lease.
Well, it's a net lease for the first, it's a gross lease for the first year. It's not a net lease at all. I don't subsidize the owner's expenses at all. So I have a gross lease for my first year at $17 a square foot. I will have a gross lease for my second year at $17.25. The next year is $17.50. And I couldn't sign it quick enough.
So that is a graduated lease.
As more tenants move in, if you wanted to put them, remember, graduated lease is like a grand opening special. Well, it kind of was a grand opening special because this building was pretty much vacant. You know, they were really hurting. So, anyway, you can see that's kind of stretching for a graduated lease, but that's not a bad analogy if you understand what a graduated lease is. It's a grand opening special. And the rents increase as more tenants move in. But I know exactly.
You're locked.
I'm locked. I know exactly where my rent's going to be next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. And that fifth year, we'll see what happens. Who knows what the market's going to be like? And what if the market crashes? And it very well could. It very well could. I started saying, I started talking about these buildings like this, for the most part, are dinosaurs. Instead of renting 10,000 square feet, you only rent 3,000 because everybody works out of their houses. And because of that, most of these buildings I looked at were pretty much vacant. I mean, pretty close to being vacant. But none of them turned me on, and they all wanted more rent than this one. And so when I moved into this one, it was pretty much vacant. 3 floors, 18,000 square feet each floor. So, I analyzed everything. I'd already looked at the market for 2 years, came close a couple of times, and I had an angel on my shoulder because this worked out better than anything else I looked at. So, anyway, and I keep telling you guys too, if you ever want to have a business meeting with somebody, please, you want to have it here, you're more than welcome to. You can use our conference room or use my office. I have one of the nicest offices in town. I can, with the view I have and everything, if it's an executive suite, if anybody would like to use that. But our conference room also, we use it for a second classroom if we need to. And if you guys want to have a meeting, just let us know, let Jennifer know. Make sure we don't have anything going on that day or whatever. Glad to help you guys out with your meetings. So, after all, your family, we're all in this together.
A big thing that's going on right now is where you can lease an office for an hour or two to have them. What are those called? What am I calling?
They're like an executive suite to a point.
It's an office
But,
lease.
and there's a couple of them I looked at also from that standpoint. In fact, I almost opened up one. I thought maybe I should just do an executive suite on this and that and everything, and I thought, no, I don't need that pressure. Don't need that on my plate. I want it to, where I know what's going on every month and everything, so you have to analyze it. All different ways to rent. There's so many new ways to rent.
So may I ask you a question? That closely, you already racked the price like $15 per square feet, right? And every year still raise up like is it percentage or how do they count it that?
Okay, so let's run through this again. So how can I call this a gross lease if every year it goes up? Well,
like
it's
an
a gross
inflation
lease for the
lease,
first, what's that?
Is there any such thing as an inflation lease, or what would kind of?
Well, every lease is an inflation lease. It's eventually going to go up,
Yeah.
no matter what. And, unless there is no inflation, in 2007, 8, 9, rents went down to nothing. And rents are going down in these type of buildings. And there's some really nice buildings out there, but they're still getting primo for them. But again, and you were saying...
like $15 per square feet, right? You sign up the lease for this year, but the next year they still like improve up a little bit, like a percentage, like 50%.
Yeah. So, like I say, so I do have a gross lease. This first year it's $17 a square foot, period. Next year it's going to be $17.25, period, for that whole year. So I have a gross lease, a yearly gross lease, and there's no surprises. I know exactly what it's going to be.
Set amount each year.
Set amount every year. It's not a net lease. I'm not subsidizing any of the other things. Am I subsidizing the owner's expenses? Of course I am. He's got to build those into these leases or he's going to lose the building, let's face it. But it's not spread out that way. He's taking my rent money and of course he's paying the taxes on it. He's paying the upkeep. He's paying the cleaning crews to come in. So, good conversations here, guys. You're going to have several questions on the state exam about leases. Plus, you're going to be involved in them in this business. Ex-student called me up last week. She said, I just rented a building over in Old Town Arvada, right in the middle of all the action up there. And she took me up and she said, okay, here's one office right here. Small little office. She said, the people who are going to rent it decided they don't want to rent it. So we want to rent this for $4.25 a month. I went, really? $425 a month for that? It was a nice little space there. And do I want to maybe... That's good, thank you.
But they already paid the side contract is like $8 per square feet, but how come they still need like us?
It was
like,
in the
pay
lease.
more?
It was in the lease. We'll adjust it accordingly at the end of the year. It's going to be more or might be less, depending on what we split it up over everybody.
Is there any tax incentives to keep the rent low and then the CAM high? Because I mean, CAM is really just property maintenance. That's really all that stands for.
For who to
For
do
building
it?
maintenance.
If I'm a business doing it, it's all a tax deduction. If I'm buying it as a residence, no, it's not deductible at all. Unless you form a corporation. And the way I understand it, for tax purposes, you can write off your rent if you put it in a corporate charter, that part of your corporate mission statement is to explore and utilize rental properties for residential purposes. Make sure you have it spelled out really well, okay? And the way, whenever I talk about taxes, guys, I always start out the way I understand it, because taxes get very complicated. Tax experts get in trouble. Good buddy of mine, he's a tax attorney. And he just got audited. I mean, they were after him for close to $1 million in back taxes. And he knew more than they did. You know, needless to say, they finally settled for $11,000. But he was sweating it. I mean, it was bad news. So when you're talking about taxes, even a super tax attorney can get the heck beat out of them. So always start off when you're talking about taxes, the way I understand it, check it out yourself. So, let's keep going, guys. So, page 2115, we have a gross lease, set amount per month. Then we have a farm lease. Maybe you pay your rent with your crops or with your animals. A farm lease. Elements of a lease. Same thing as in elements of a contract, elements of a deed of trust, with very few exceptions. Let's go down the list. A date, the parties, should be competent parties, of course. What is consideration? Something of value for something of value. Something of value for something of value. Description of the property. We hang our hat on the legal description. The legal description. The address can change. Words of conveyance. We have to show an intent to convey. Intent to convey. Conditions and exceptions. I'm going to rent you my property, my house, but I want to keep the garage for my own personal storage of stuff. So I'm going to exempt or accept the garage. Lessor and lessee's covenants. Any and all covenants to be fulfilled by either party should be included in the lease, if there are any. Any promises you're making to each other. Signatures. A lease for longer than 1 year must be in writing and signed by the parties through that statute of frauds. Good. The best evidence of the parties' mutual assent is a signed document. And if a lease lessee takes possession without signing, only the landlord, only the owner, only the lessor needs signed to create a valid lease. The lessee's taking possession is evidence of his or her assent to the lease. So the tenant does not have to sign the lease, as long as the landlord signed it. You taking possession says, yes, you're saying, I do agree with it. A seal, we don't have seals on leases in Colorado. Some states you do.
I heard those are only in California.
Yeah, mainly California. Yeah, California
Well, coastal
loves
cities,
seals.
Like road
What-
seals are.
Well, not only,
I'm trying to be a smart ass.
no, but no, cute, because they have a bunch of seals. And
by
that-
the coast, that's why I said coastal
Cute.
city.
But actually, you're pretty right though, Chad. Every community property state usually has a lot of seals that they use. What is a community property state? Help me out.
Oh, like what's that called? Joint,
Any,
common law marriage.
no,
Or the joint
Colorado's a
community.
common law married state, okay?
joint-
Community property state was where anything that you bring into a marriage remains yours. Anything you get during the marriage by gift or inheritance is yours. It's what you produce together, that's the community property. And every western state is a community property state except for Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. We talk about that pretty heavy here. We really talk about it heavy in the law and practice portion. So if you're still not real crystal clear on it, we're gonna hit it again big time. Plus, we're gonna have a lot of questions on it too.
Colorado is not,
Colorado is a common law state.
yeah.
Yeah. That's why, and how do we make laws in a common law state? Two ways. We can do it through state statute, the Congress or Senate, or common law, which is court cases.
You said Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, what was the other?
Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, and Utah are common law states. They're not community property states. Wisconsin is a community property state. I have no idea why. Wisconsin of all states. And Alaska, you have a choice of whether you want to get married common law or as a community property. Which would you prefer? Have you guys thought about this since we've been talking about it? If you had a choice? You can argue both sides, really.
Depends on what side of it you're in, right?
It depends who I'm marrying, how rich is she, let's figure this out here.
Or how rich are you?
Exactly, yeah. So, a seal, we don't have seals in Colorado. Delivery, like a deed, a lease must be delivered to be effective. You have to have delivery and acceptance, don't you? Recording, you never record a lease. That could cloud the title when it came time to sell it, with one exception. If I have a rent with option on your property, I think I'd record it. That way you can't sell it out from underneath me. Because the title company's gonna say, hey, these people are trying to sell this property. Say, thank you very much, and I go and tell them, you can't sell this property, I have a rent with option with you. Yeah,
So, prior to that, prior to delivery, it said that you actually don't need the person who's moving in to sign, you just need to deliver them a copy of the lease that you've signed?
you acquiesce to the lease when you move in, whether you've signed it or not, yeah. And leases are always paid in advance, Unless in the lease, it doesn't say how leases are paid, then they're paid in arrears. You think rents are hard to collect up front? Try to collect them in arrears. Does everyone understand what I just said? If there's nothing in the lease about whether it's paid in arrears or advance, it's not paid until at the end of the month. Now remember, all interest is always paid in arrears. When I make a few days from now, when I make my October 1st payment, what month does that cover? It covers September. It covers the previous month, because interest is always paid in arrears. All the way through September, that person who has the deed of trust, made interest on that interest all through that month. That's why interest isn't paid until the end of the month, and it includes the month you just went through. Leases are paid in advance. That's how they're supposed to be paid.
You said unless they're not in the lease that way.
unless they're not mentioned about whether they're in advance or arrears, then all of a sudden it's automatically in arrears. Yeah. Now, is the landlord gonna put up with you paying arrears? Probably not. But nonetheless, you know your rights, you know what's going on. And then we have acknowledgement. What's another word for acknowledgement? A notary, good. Lead-based paint disclosures, help me out. In Colorado, it's, what about 78?
Based on when it was built.
No.
Permit, I mean, permit.
The permit, get your permit on it before January 1st, 1978. In Colorado, every other state, it's built before January 1st, 1978. Guys, you're gonna have questions on this on the national portion of the exam and the state portion. You gotta know which side you're on that state exam, because they're gonna mix those questions in there. Don't let them get you. Don't let them get you.
Bastards.
Don't let the bastards win. Exactly. And what else was banned January 1st, 1978? Asbestos was banned also.
But you don't have a form for that.
No form, no requirement, nothing. Then we have any city and county regulations on occupancy. Let's read this. Some other lease clauses that may apply include cost of living adjustment, handling of the security deposit, use of the premises, acceptance of the premises by the lessee, surrender of the premises at the end of the term, maintenance, repair, and alterations of premiums during the term, responsibility for payment of utilities, personal and real estate property taxes, entry and inspection by lessor's agent, assignment and subletting, agent hold harmless clauses. What's another word for that?
Exculpatory.
Very good. Exculpatory. You want to write that on the side? Exculpatory, hold harmless clauses. Protective language. We can't have those in our contracts. Hold harmless clause. Repossession due to unpaid rent. Abandonment of the premises by the tenant. The holding over. Future sale of the premises. Concession of lease by condemnation or destruction of the premises. Right of the lessor to mortgage or subordinate. Sign regulation. If I have a 99-year lease, can I get a mortgage on that lease? You bet I can. It's going to be pretty rare I get a 99-year lease unless it's a pretty valuable property.
Yeah, because the mortgage usually, what, like 30 years, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's well within the 99 years.
Yeah. All that. So you guys will probably never deal with a 99-year lease. It'd be real rare if you do.
Only if you were selling real estate in Hawaii.
In Hawaii or California or even in Aspen. And what you're doing there is usually it's a long-term ground lease is what you have because you can't afford to buy the properties.
Really? You do about land leases in California? 'Cause I never
Oh, along the coast? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Going Malibu and those places, you bet.
Yeah.
You do
I knew Hawaii,
long-term.
'cause my dad grew up in Hawaii. I knew that, like, a lot of the
Oh,
Hawaiian
yeah.
Islands, there was a land lease.
Yeah.
As far as the states go.
Yeah.
But I don't know about California.
Very much so. And again, continuing, future sale of the premises, cessation of the lease by condemnation through eminent domain, good. Right of the lessor or mortgage to subordinate. Signed regulations, renewal options, termination notice and disposition, deposit records upon change of property managers. I love that paragraph, and that's not anywhere near everything that could be in that lease. It's not for amateurs. It's not for an attorney who isn't a real estate attorney to draw one of these up. They can draw any contract, but you better have a real estate attorney who's competent, if you can find one, to draw one of these up for you. Can you draw one up yourself? Yes, you can, especially for your own property. But boy, be careful. Make sure you're saying what you want to say. Not a bad idea to have somebody else look at it. Last two lines on this page. You don't need to know that those first two dots, but the next two, yes. A month to month, but or up to, but less than 6 months, you have to give 10 days. So you have a month to month lease. How is a month-to-month stated? Usually you have to give a 30-day notice on month-to-month. But you have to give at least 10 days. And tenancy at will, 3-day notice. 3-day notice of eviction on tenancy at will. Okay. Look on page 2117. A mutual agreement to terminate a lease without obligation on the part of either the landlord or tenant is a termination by surrender. Highlight that, you surrender the lease. Highlight that word surrender. You both agree. You both agree to get out of the deal. Breach of condition. Failure by either the lessor or lessee to perform agreed upon conditions or covenants constitute a breach of the lease and may permit the injured party to cancel the lease. Eviction of the tenant. There's two types of eviction. Let's read these. An eviction may be either actual or constructive. Actual eviction occurs when a tenant is ousted from the premises, completely or partially, either by an act of the landlord or by someone with superior title. You just move out and you quit paying your rent. They can just evict you, and they can use your security deposit to pay for that rent that you're not paying. Constructive eviction occurs when the leased premises deteriorates to such physical condition owing to some act or omission of the landlord that the tenant is unable to use the premises for the period intended. Failure to furnish heat or other facilities contemplated by the lease, or any other deprivation of use by the lessor, is also a constructive eviction. Now, constructive eviction, you have to move out first, then claim constructive eviction. The heat goes out in the middle of winter. The landlord says, you know what, I'm just too busy. I don't have the money for it. Hey, give them 72 hours. If they don't start working on it, you can move out and claim constructive eviction. But even if they started working on it and haven't completed it, as long as they're making an effort to fix it, you can't claim constructive eviction. And of course, you have to go before court and get that stated. Yeah.
So that,
To her refrigerator went out and the landlord would refuse to come and fix it.
Yeah.
Is that,
Could that be part of constructive eviction? Does that interfere with your habitability of the property? I don't have the money to get another refrigerator, and the refrigerator was part of what I'm paying per month. Yeah, they have to replace it with one. Unfortunately, it stays in similar condition and quality. Another one that's broken, essentially.
She has to move out though before she can make that claim?
She can, no. Yeah, she has to move out first and then claim constructive eviction, unfortunately.
To get out of the lease.
To get out of the lease, to claim constructive eviction, you can't still be living
You
there.
have to do some sort of legal action, or how do you actually claim?
Well, yeah, of course, you're not just gonna say, I want my money back, I want my security deposit back and everything, I'm claiming constructive eviction. I'm a landlord, what am I gonna say? Well, I'll see you in court.
What was the time frame on that?
so,
Again, a constructive eviction, they have 72 hours to get started to fix it. And if they're working on it, making a concerted effort to fix it, and it's taking longer than you thought, tough. You can't claim constructive eviction.
so eviction, 3 days notice, right? And then these 3 days, we have to go to court, get the permit, or just like write
This is
a-
real good, guys. This 3-day notice of eviction on a tenancy at will. I tell the story about that buddy of mine years ago. He called me up, he was going through a tough time. He said, can I just sack out at the office for a couple nights at your office? I said, yeah, go ahead. And he stayed for 10 months. And it was just a real disaster. He'd been my friend for years. I never knew how bad an alcoholic he was. He'd drink those Bud Lights. And that's what most alcoholics do. They just keep that constant buzz all the time by chugging down those Coors Lights and Bud Lights. And it got to the point where he was just obnoxious. I'd take a break, he'd come in and teach the class. I mean, it was, oh yeah.
You left it out last time you told us.
Unbelievable, oh yeah. It was bad, it was ugly.
Is he sitting in the
And he-
class when he
and-
started
Oh yeah,
out?
and he thought he was so funny, and he wasn't. Anyway, and so finally he grabbed, it wasn't Jennifer, it was a few people before her, and he grabbed him. And so I gave him a 3-day notice. I said, I'm gonna press charge. I asked her, I said, do you wanna press charges against him? She said, no, but I don't want him around here anymore. I said, I agree. So I gave him a 3-day notice of eviction. I said, get out of here and go get some help. No matter what, you're going to get out of here. But if you don't get into rehab, I'm going to press charges against you too. And what happened, I gave him a 3-day notice, completely ignored it. And then I gave him another 3-day notice. While he was gone, I changed the locks and got him out of here. So anyway, you've got to know what your rights are. You're not supposed to do that, to change the lock thing. So hear this on the tape, guys. Don't say, oh yeah, Jim did it, must be cool. It's not cool. What you do is you get a sheriff's eviction, like Karen said, where you essentially go to the police department and they will get an eviction and they will evict the guy. They're going to say, okay, and they're going to stand at the door and make him get all of his stuff out of there. I didn't want to get the sheriff involved with my buddy, so I kind of took a way out where he wouldn't have been embarrassed by it. But anyway, so be careful when you're doing this. But remember that down at the bottom, those last two. In a month to month, you have to give at least 10 days. Usually they want 30 days, and 30 days is fine. It has to be at least 10. Tenancy at will, 3-day notice of eviction. Okay, then on page 2117, we talked about surrender and acceptance. The breach of condition, failure by either lessor or lessee to perform agreed upon conditions or covenants, constitute a breach of the lease and may permit the injured party to cancel the lease. May, that's the operative word, not guaranteed, but may. And we talked about eviction of the tenant, either actual eviction or constructive eviction. Termination under other conditions. If leased property is taken for public use by condemnation, any lease is terminated. Eminent domain, right? The tenant is entitled to compensation for the value of the unexpired portion of the lease, and the tenant's claim is superior to that of the landlord. Top of the next page. The foreclosure of a mortgage or other lien may terminate the lease. If the mortgage or other lien was prior in time to the lease and the tenant had either actual notice or constructive notice of the lien, then foreclosure will terminate the lease. Let's keep reading here. A carefully drafted lease will clearly set forth all the duties and responsibilities of the parties and avoid ambiguities that might lead to controversy. Absent a complete written lease setting forth all terms, the law presumes certain agreements on the part of the parties. For instance, unless there's agreement, we just talked about this, to pay the rent in advance, the law presumes that rent isn't due until the end of the rental period. Highlight that, guys. That's something you want to tell your clients also. Make sure you handle it yourself that way too, on your properties that you own. A tenant may use the premises in any lawful, appropriate way not expressly restricted in the lease. If the premises are unsuitable for the specific period of the lease, the landlord, unless having agreed to do so, need not remodel the property, but the tenant may do so. A commercial landlord may compete or lease to a competing business within the same building unless the lease so prohibits. Skip the next two paragraphs. Unless a lease provides otherwise, a landlord is generally not required to keep the premises in repair. Neither is the tenant required to make repairs. Provisions for repair and for the scope of the duties of the party obligated to keep the premises in repair should be clearly spelled out, delineated in the lease. An agreement to repair does not impose the duty to rebuild if the premises are accidentally destroyed. A landlord is not required to repair or make habitable property that is uninhabitable at the time of making the lease. A tenant is presumed to have full knowledge of the condition of the property and should specify the desired repairs. A lessor has no right to enter the leased premises. The landlord cannot enter the leased premises. A landlord's right to enter upon the premises to inspect the property or to show it to prospective purchasers or lessees is limited to what is spelled out in the agreement. As a general rule, a person occupying the property is liable to others for injury caused by the condition of the property. An occupant is also liable to others for any nuisance resulting from the occupant's use that interferes with others' use and enjoyment of their property. So, what is that called? I have a right to keep the landlord out. Quiet enjoyment. We've talked about, where else have we talked about quiet enjoyment? In the bundle of rights, it means what it says, right of quiet enjoyment. We have right to quietly inhabit our properties. That's quiet enjoyment. Where else do we see quiet enjoyment?
Unless it's stated in your contract, your lease agreement, that you can enter.
Yes, it's only an implied right
Right.
in the lease. Thank you for saying that, Ralph. It's only an implied right, which you can give up by letting the landlord come in if you want to. It's only an implied right of quiet enjoyment. Are we leasing anything definitively when are we purchasing anything when we're leasing a property?
Right to the space.
We're purchasing a right of possession, a right of habitability. And we're also purchasing an implied right of quiet enjoyment, where we can keep the landlord out. Those are the two things we're purchasing, but how it's spelled out in your lease.
Quiet enjoyment is also on the deed.
What deed?
Or the warranty of deed.
What warranty deed?
The general warranty.
There we go.
Thank you, sorry.
That's good. Anyway, so we have the quiet enjoyment and general warranty deed. What's that mean, Lisa? You opened your big, I'm sorry.
I
you-
know, no, I know.
What does it mean in a general warranty deed?
Yeah, no,
Help her out.
It means that nobody can come in and like if any liens or all third parties.
Protection, no, not about liens so much as third-party protection.
Third party.
You'll protect against any third party who says they have an interest other than what I say I'm transferring you. And that's that right of quiet enjoyment in a general warranty deed. And how will I enforce that? With the fourth covenant of further assurance. I'll provide whatever documents I have to, I'll even go to court.
Can you give an example, like, of what a third party would, I mean, what that would be?
Oh, there's a lot of crooks out there who they say, you know, what they put a spurious lien on the property, an unwarranted lien. And they're saying, hey, you owe me for this lien that's on that property. And then you check it out and you say, where's the lien? How did it happen? You see these often, guys. You see this often. And you've got to make sure that your parties are aware that this lien was on there. But it's only for $1,200, but it's a false lien. $1,200. That's a pretty good ripoff. So again, protection against third-party interest.
And that's the general or the special?
That's the general warranty deed. A special warranty deed only has two promises. I did receive a deed and I've done nothing to damage the deed since I've taken it over. Let's look on page 2119. Look at the second paragraph there, third paragraph, if you want to count it. Unless the provisions of the lease prohibit, a tenant may assign or sublet the premises. We spent time on that. The lessee would remain liable to the lessor for the performance of all the original lease conditions. Most leases prohibit subletting or assignment without the lessor's prior consent. I tell the story about the time I got a call from the Louisville Police Department. And this landlord had been in these people's house 3 times at 1:30 in the morning looking over their property. And so they went to have the guy arrested for trespassing. And the policeman said, we've talked to several lawyers and they don't know how to answer this. And I said, it's no mystery. Do you have a lease in front of you? And he said, yeah. And I said, what does it say about that? The part that says quiet enjoyment, there should be some that says quiet enjoyment. And this one did because the landlord was using this. And it said that the landlord can inspect the property at any time at his discretion without permission. And they signed it. So he can go in there anytime he wants to.
Stalking and checking on the property.
Well, yeah,
whatever.
but I mean, they signed it, so,
Are there
You know.
any laws in the state of Colorado that might go against what that contract says?
are there any laws that go against that? Can you claim ignorance? No,
No.
because if you could claim ignorance, everybody'd do it,
No,
right?
but I'm just saying, like, sometimes contracts will be written up according to how, you know, the landlord wants them, but then there's some Colorado laws that say you can put that in your contract, but it's not gonna stand up because it's illegal.
Most of the time, what you're looking at are common laws, where the judge is the one who makes that ruling. And so again, every judge, judges, we're ruled by law here in the United States. But those laws are interpreted differently by different attorneys and by different judges. You got liberal judges, you have conservative judges, just like real life, So, let's keep going, guys. Let's see. We talked about that. Let's keep going here. And this kind of goes to some kind of cool things. We see all these on 21-25, the electrical charging stations. If you have that in front of your apartment, you're going to be moving into or something, read this. Pretty good information. On page 21-27, remember in our contract we have this little paragraph this big about carbon monoxide? This is how big it really is. It's page 27, 28, 29, and 30. It's more than just that piddly little paragraph, guys. So if you're a landlord, you better know what that's all about. Okay. Chapter 22, farm and ranch brokerages. Again, we cover townships, ranges, all that good stuff, sections. We cover that anyway. We cover it so heavy in the law and practice that we're just going to skip that. Let's go to chapter 25 and talk about fair housing. We spent a lot of time on fair housing in the national portion. Now we're going to tweak it to Colorado. Let's go to page 25-12. 25-12. And let's read this. Really good couple pages here, guys. Look at the second paragraph where it says Colorado Fair Housing Act, Title 24, Article 34, Colorado CRS, Colorado statutes. Colorado enacted prohibitions against housing discrimination in 1959, becoming the first state in the nation to pass anti-discrimination laws pertaining to private property. We should be pretty proud of that. The Colorado Act even preceded the Federal Fair Housing Act and prohibited discrimination based on race, creed, color, national origin, or ancestry in the renting or purchasing of housing. In 1969, sex was added as a protected class, and in 1973, marital status and religion were included. 11 years before Congress added handicap to the Federal Fair Housing Act, Colorado included physical handicap in 1977 as a class to be protected from discrimination. After the Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act in 1988 added handicap and familial status, the Colorado Act was amended to add familial status and to expand the definition of handicap to include both physical and mental. Subsequently, all Colorado statutes were amended to replace the word handicap with disability. Sexual orientation was added as a basis in 2008. So let's back up here, guys. There's 3 dates you need to remember. They're not on this page. The first date is 1866, a year after the Civil War, and it said you can never discriminate based on race or national origin. 1866, and it was ignored for almost 100 years, not until 1965, 99 years later, when there was the March on Selma. That was 1965, guys. So we have 1866. If you remember that, then 99 years later, in 1965, we had the March on Selma, where it really got the attention of the American people, that these rights were not being enforced, and we had to do something about it. The next day we have to remember is 1968, the year Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we have Section 8 of the Fair Housing Laws. They were the first fair housing laws that mentioned the different classes that are to be protected. The first fair housing laws that had teeth in them. so you couldn't just ignore them. 1866, 1965, 1968. This 1988 was an important one, but nothing really on the state exam where they're going to reference it in any great detail. The other three, you better believe it. There's going to be references for that, guys.
So 1866 was what?
1866, you cannot discriminate because of race or national origin.
That's the Civil Rights Act, right?
The Civil Rights Act of 1866, then the March on Selma, 1965, and then Title VIII in 1968. Remember 1968, the year Martin Luther King was assassinated, and Section 8. Easy to remember, keep those two together. Section 8, 68, 1968.
Where does the March in Selma tie into that?
1965.
I understand the date, but what does that have to do in reference to real estate law?
Well, that was the first time that the United States people stood up and said, yes, we might have a problem here when it comes to fair housing. Because what happened is a peaceful demonstration with Martin Luther King, and they were attacked and beaten. Many of them ended up in the hospital. I don't know if anybody died, but I'm sure probably some did. And the rest of the nation's going, okay, what's really going on here? And then 3 years later, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, then we got Title VIII, which included a bunch more classes, and that's when we got some fair housing laws that finally made sense. And we've been adding to them ever since. Colorado has the most number of protected classes of any state, some we should be proud of, and we have the most stringent laws when it comes to enforcing fair housing laws. Let's keep going here, guys. All of the actions listed in Part 3 as illegal practices under federal law are likewise illegal under Colorado fair housing laws or statutes. In addition, Colorado law has additional prohibitions that, although probably illegal under federal law, are more clearly spelled out in the Colorado fair housing laws, and these include, I'm at the numbers down here, to honor or attempt to honor any discriminatory covenants, to segregate or separate in housing, to make any inquiry, reference, or record that is discriminatory, to discharge, demote, or discriminate in matters of compensation against an agent or employee for obeying the law, and to require any person accompanied by an assistance dog to pay a charge for that dog.
But they even have to list this stuff, huh? It's ridiculous.
That they have to list it?
Yeah, it's like, you know, you
Common
better
sense.
follow the law,
Yeah.
you know, like, or else.
Yeah. See, and that's just it, you know. Denver is not known as a prejudiced community, and yet in the 1920s, we led the nation in Ku Klux Klan. We were the center of the nation for the Ku Klux Klan. We got them out of here.
This is
Yeah.
Stapleton, right? So as I interpret this, what this means is that you can't charge someone a pet deposit if it's a.
That's where we're going, guy. Assistance dog or a service animal. We have a no pet policy, and you bring in a service dog, you have to allow them to rent. And you cannot charge them for an animal deposit if they have a service dog. So, and you're gonna see that on the state exam.
Just dog or service animal?
Any animal, service animal, yeah.
Could be a bird.
You do have service, yeah, you do.
Yeah, theirs doesn't matter, as long as it's a service animal.
Yeah. So, and the question on the state exam I talk about where you bring a contract into you're the listing board, you bring a contract in, the guy says, I'm not gonna sell to one of those people with that name. Well, what you can do is turn them in and claim full commission, which is half right. We can't turn them in, even though that's what the answer is. Only the aggrieved person can actually turn them in
And get full commission.
and get the full commission, you betcha. Yeah.
When they settle, or?
Well, if that's what they did, you want to, of course, get that in writing. Here's something else that we dug up here, and this is for the protective covenants, and this is for Brentwood here in Denver. This is still on their charter. Only persons of the Caucasian race shall own, use, or occupy any dwelling or residence erected upon such lot or tracts. Still on the books. Isn't that amazing? In Rhino, right where I-25 and I-70 meet, they say that you cannot have any Caucasians there. Just as bad, just as wrong. And if they're like this up north, what are they like down south in some of these communities?
They can't enforce any of this.
That's totally unenforceable. Totally unenforceable. But how about people who don't know any better? And you go and say, listen, you gotta move out. Look at that, we didn't know that you were coming in here. So,
How can those phrases be deleted from the title work?
this is part of the homeowners association in there that is doing this. And so this would be in the homeowners documents, not so much the city or state.
But you taking those documents says you accept them.
Yeah, you're accepting them for what they say. And how many people read these things? They don't read it, they just skim it. Read yours, guys. If you have any others that say that, please bring them to me so I can use them as examples.
If it is illegal under these fair housing laws, why is it still in there? And can't they be turned in, fined? I mean,
Nobody's taking them to task yet. And if you live in Brentwood, guys, anybody here live in Brentwood? Anybody here live in Rhino? You know, these are just two that I know about. There's others out there. Check it out.
District?
Rhino District, that's where, that's,
Whatever it is, but
yeah.
the whole district.
So, I mean, the manager of that should be held responsible, shouldn't he?
He didn't draw this up, and he probably didn't read them either, you know, with any competence. So, yeah, we can go ifs all day long, guys. Let's keep going here. Major differences between federal and Colorado fair housing laws, guys. Pay attention to these first three, big time. Colorado law covers commercial and residential property. Title 8, the federal, covers residential only. Guaranteed question. Guaranteed question. Colorado, it's residential and commercial. Number 2, Colorado law prohibits marital status. Title 8 does not. We're one of the very few states where marital status. I tell the story about when I moved out of my house, when I first moved out of the house. Back then they had singles only apartments. You can't have singles only apartments anymore. Because of marital status. Number 3, Colorado law protects both ancestry and national origin, whereas federal law lists national origin only. Colorado law makes it illegal to discriminate on the basis of both creed and religion, whereas the federal law lists religion only.
What does creed mean, Jim?
Let's look at this. That's a good point. So what are we talking about here? We have creed, national origin, religion. Are they pretty much the same thing to a point, at least creed and religion? If you see a difference, then you can't discriminate. They're kind of really covering their tracks, is what they're doing, making sure that if you see a difference between creed, religion, that you're able to differentiate and say, nah, I can't discriminate because of either of those. Like I say, Colorado has more than anybody else. Is that a little redundant? Maybe, but it's on the books. So, let's go to number 6 on the next page. Colorado law specifically states that it is not illegal to restrict the sale, rental, or development of housing designed or intended for persons with disabilities. Note, although age is not a protected class under either federal or Colorado law, guys, age is not a protected class under fair housing. It is illegal to discriminate on the basis of age in Aspen, Crested Butte, Denver, Telluride, and right down Broomfield. Broomfield. Broomfield's a county, a city and county. What's that?
Can you say those over again?
It's right there.
Oh,
It's right
sorry.
there. On 6,
Okay.
that note. And guys, nothing in the state exam about that, but make a note of that. We didn't have questions about this because those can change. Those can change. Now, let's go to the bottom page 2514. 2514, housing practices. Definitions down here. As used in this part 5, unless the context otherwise requires, number 1, the aggrieved person means any person who claims to have been injured by discriminatory housing practice or believes that he will be injured by discriminatory housing practice that is about to occur. And only the aggrieved person can turn in a complaint. Disability means a physical impairment which substantially limits one or more of a person's major life activities and includes a record of such an impairment and being regarded as having such an impairment. On or after July 1st, 1990, as to Part 5, disability also includes a person who has a mental impairment, not just physical, but mental also. But the term does not include any person currently involved in the illegal use of or addiction to a controlled substance. The term mental impairment, as used in subparagraph 1 of this paragraph B, means any mental or psychological disorder, such as an intellectual or developmental disability, organic brain syndrome, mental illness, or specific learning disabilities. Discriminate includes both segregate and separate. Familial status means one or more individuals who have not attained 18 years of age, being, highlight that word, domiciled. Look for that word. Means you're living under their roof. I'm domiciled with these people. Being domiciled with a parent or other person having legal custody of or parental responsibilities for such individual or individuals, or the designee of such person, parent, or other person having such custody or parental responsibilities with the written permission of such parent or other person. Familial status shall apply to any person who is pregnant or is in the process of securing legal custody or parental responsibilities of any individual who has not attained 18 years of age. Pretty good paragraph. That tells you everything about familial status you need to know. And guys, you're going to see it on the national portion and the Colorado portion. Remember that word, domiciled. And when does familial status does not come into play? Let's go to page 25.3. 25.3. 25.3 and number 5. 25.3 and look at number 5, middle of the page. Housing for seniors may be exempt only from familial status protection if it meets one of the following 3 requirements. Housing provided under a state or federal program that the Secretary of HUD determines is designed and operated for elderly persons. Housing in which 100% of the residents are 62 years of age or older, or housing in which 80% of the occupied units have at least one person 55 years of age or older, and the housing publishes and adheres to policies demonstrating the intent to house persons over 55. We're seeing more and more of these 55 communities out there. Now you know what they're all about. Yeah.
So what if, like, a grandparent who's 55 or older is wanting to move into the senior housing, but they have, like, guardianship of their grandchild? Would they?
Okay, this is that's a real, do you have a story about that, Monique, or?
No, I mean, my grandparents were in the process of adopting my cousins, and so I just know that this is probably.
Yeah, you know, if you're living in an adult community, you cannot have a kid in there. You can't even have your grandkids stay overnight in these communities, pretty much. So again, understanding these, and guys, this is a part of our market you don't want to ignore, because a lot of these people, when they go to these retirement communities, have a home to sell. It's like the guy who was his first time in his retirement community, sitting there having lunch, and this lady came over and sat down and said, you know, this is your first day here. And he said, yes, it is. And he said, well, you obviously could have been here years ago. You're well over 62 years old. And this is your first day here? And he said, yes, I've had my difficulties. He said, I just spent the last 25 years in prison. He said, what happened? He said, well, I murdered my wife, chopped her up in little pieces, and buried her in the backyard. She said, Oh, so you're single? Oh, wasn't that bad. Oh, come on. Anyway. Anyway, guys, let's go ahead and break for lunch. I will see you in about an hour. And that is the end of lesson 9 of Colorado Contracts and Regulations.
Do we have a presenter today, or?
I